March 19th, 2025 meeting of the Public Works Commission to order at 6:30 p.m. The first item on the agenda is the agenda itself.
Motion to accept the agenda.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion around that motion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye for myself. Any opposed? Well, okay. Next item on the agenda is public forum. Just a reminder that we ask the public to please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you. Is there anyone online?
Yeah, we have Sharon Busher in queue.
Hi, good evening. This is Sharon Busher. And I didn't see if Chapin was there tonight, so my comments are for the commission to hear, but really for the director also. So I've been following a TDM proposal that Charles Dillard, who's the planning director, is overseeing. And, you know, we have some legislation regarding TDM, and Chapin is what I consider the guru of TDM. He's the be all and end all in my book. And so, but this component of TDM is now not the institutional, you know, where you move employees to a place of work and they park, or they take a shuttle there and then they stay and then they go back. This is neighborhood TDM. And so it came about when they removed some parking on North Winooski Avenue around the community health center and those small businesses, and realized that that created some tension. And how could we move people around with other neighborhood TDM proposals? Because people in neighborhoods don't come and park, well, unless they live there. They come and they visit for an hour or two, or shop or whatever, go to a doctor's appointment. And so it's a different concept. And so there was a pilot, and then that pilot was expanded and looked at citywide. And I feel that there's been a lot of conversation about metered parking in residential areas where there's residential parking only. And I couldn't really get a sense of the involvement that Public Works has had with this proposal, and if it's really been flushed out before you, the commission. I apologize if you've heard all about it, because I follow a lot of things, but I have a life besides following as much as I can about what's happening in the city. And so I think that there's a real need for the commission and the department to look at multimodal, but especially pedestrians. They've always been the weakest link in the bike walk component. Walkers really don't get the attention they need. And I'm not sure that this TDM neighborhood proposal gives the attention pedestrians need. And I also would like to really understand the rationale behind selling spaces on neighborhood streets. So I am trying to understand why we would want to, in one hand, tell people to shuttle their employees in and not bring the cars into Burlington, and on the other hand say, come on in and we'll sell you a parking space on our neighborhood streets. So I really would hope that the commission has heard about this, and if not, then I'd really like the commission to have a chance to weigh in on these proposals before they become part of our policy. So I'm sorry, I think I exceeded the time, but it's kind of lengthy and important, and I appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Linda in queue.
Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Risby. I live on Hungerford Terrace, and I'm here to talk about the chicane. I have a few comments. I think there should have been a real conversation about this involving neighborhood meetings as indicated in the traffic calming manual. and these didn't happen to my knowledge. And there should have been more advance notice than a little over 2 weeks before this meeting, which was when flyers were placed on doors and which was the earliest notification I'm aware of. I've been living on Hungerford Terrace for over 30 years now, and I'm a bit puzzled by this traffic calming proposal. I haven't noticed a speeding problem. Our street is just 3 blocks long, and we've got 3 stop signs already acting as natural speed bumps. The memo supporting this decision asserts that Hungerford Terrace qualifies for traffic calming based on the 2020 traffic calming manual. But supporting crash and speed data is not presented in the memo, at least not in the one posted the other day that I saw. I consulted the manual, and when I checked the Vermont Department of Transportation's crash query database, I found only 1 accident with injury at Hungerford Terrace, on Hungerford Terrace in the last 5 years, which was at the intersection with Buell. And while that's 1 too many, it doesn't meet the criteria for traffic calming needed. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is all in queue. We just got another hand raised from Maddie.
Okay.
So, should I start talking? Yes?
Yes, thanks. We're ready for you.
You guys can hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Good evening. My name is Maddie Pozick, and I also live on Hungerford Terrace. And I'm also here to talk about the chicane. I've lived on Hungerford Terrace since October of 1981. And throughout my time on Hungerford Terrace, I have appreciated that there is not a lot of traffic on my street and that cars don't speed. Hungerford Terrace, if you're not familiar with it, is a narrow one-way street consisting of 3 short blocks, and at each intersection, there is a stop sign. This street design acts as a natural street calming faction. Therefore, I think this parking chicane is a solution looking for a problem that doesn't really exist. I don't understand why DPW has chosen Hungerford Terrace of all streets as a street that needs a parking chicane. It is not a major thoroughfare like surrounding streets as College Street or Willard Street or Pearl Street, and it's not subject to a lot of traffic. In addition, DPW only mailed the notification about this parking change on March 5th, which is 2 weeks before the meeting tonight. Neither I nor most of the residents that I've spoken to had any idea that this parking plan was being studied or planned or implemented. I sincerely wish DPW had contacted the residents before this chicane was a completed project. If only 1 or 2 residents had requested this traffic calming, why wasn't a survey generated of all the residents on Hungerford Terrace, perhaps through Front Porch Forum, asking whether or not they felt that a traffic calming plan was warranted? A survey would have been a much more thorough community engagement plan. I'd also like to talk about the 2 ADA spaces that have been discussed a lot when I looked at the agenda and the letters. So as far as those 2 spaces are concerned, the former residents at 61 Hungerford were handicapped, and they had requested these ADA compliant parking spaces many years ago. They no longer live there, which is why these spaces aren't used anymore. Converting these to regular parking spaces, I think, is certainly a great idea. Since Hungerford Terrace is a narrow street, I am also very concerned about backing out of my driveway, as cars will now be parked directly across from the driveway. This is currently not an issue for me because cars are currently parked on the west side of the street, and they'll be on the east side directly opposite my house. In conclusion, as a longtime resident of Hungerford Terrace, I do not believe a traffic calming plan or a chicane are needed at all. Thank you very much for considering this.
Thank you.
And that is all for the public comment queue.
Okay, so with that, we will close public forum and move on to the consent agenda.
Vice Chair Fox, it's, as you note, the consent agenda includes the item for Hungerford Terrace parking chicane. Should the commission want to discuss this more, you could pull it off, or staff is also supportive of proceeding. It's your choice.
Is there any desired motion to amend the consent agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the consent agenda and pull the Hungerford Terrace piece for a bit more discussion.
Okay,
I'll second.
so we'll make that item 5 and move the rest down. 4.1. Okay.
I think if I understand, there is a 4.1, so maybe the 4.5 if you want it to happen right after the. Actually, if you want, yes, that would be then after the remaining consent agenda items are approved.
Should we get a vote on that motion?
You wait a second?
Yep. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye for myself. So the amended consent agenda passes.
Okay?
Sorry, point of clarification?
Yes.
Do we need to separately approve the consent agenda with the 2 other items, or is, okay?
Yeah, the motion, as I understood it, was just to split the item
Okay.
out, and now you need to approve the remaining consent
Got it.
agenda.
Okay,
So motion to approve the remaining.
which is the approval of our draft minutes and the no turn on red at Shelburne Street and Home Ave.
Yes, and I'll second that motion of the amended consent agenda.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye for myself. And we move on to item 4.5, which is the Hungerford Terrace parking chicane.
Hi, how's it going?
Aye.
Aye.
So should I just start talking about the? I'm Jack Keller. I'm a public works engineer with the city. So the Hungerford Terrace parking chicane came along looking at resident requests, and we had a request for traffic calming measures on the street. After looking at data that we have compiled, we found it did qualify for traffic calming measures based on crashes on the street. A pedestrian crash, yeah. And so parking chicanes are extremely inexpensive, pretty simple and effective strategies to try to slow traffic on a street. And it's been shown on other streets such as Bright Street and Chase and East Ave. We've done parking chicanes on similar sized streets, and they've worked quite well. It's also it's an easy thing to reverse if there are unforeseen or unexpected challenges associated with it. And yeah, I think that's about it. It also increases parking on the street for residents for a pretty high, they're low parking on the street with a lot of residents.
So in terms of the driveways, most, if not all driveways in the city of Burlington have parking adjacent to them. So although, we're switching parking from one side of the street to the other, certain driveways didn't experience cars parked across from them. Other, they had to deal with it. More, larger driveways We did turning template analysis on commercial driveways. We had a conversation back and forth with a couple of property owners that owned apartment buildings that had, we're gonna pull in large trucks to get the dumpsters, and we worked through that with those folks to make sure that they could do that. I mean, and ultimately, although there's not necessarily a speeding condition, we do know that there is a crash condition with pedestrians and bicyclists. And as Jack said, it's a really simple thing to do. It was a simple thing to put in, and it's a simple thing to take out. And important to note, we did meet the public engagement plan when it came to this work. We didn't set up a neighborhood meeting for this particular project. We didn't feel like it was necessary in this case because we're not installing permanent fixtures. We're not putting in speed humps and curb extensions. We need to be a little bit more nimble when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I do understand how the residents feel, and I might feel the same way that they do. But I think what I'd like them to try and do is let us give it a try and stay in contact with us. And if it's something that is a detriment to their neighborhood and they can show that, then we can always switch it back. It's okay. Just some signs.
Well, can you update the commission on the public feedback that you received?
Most of the public feedback we received was very positive. It's a lot of college students that rent apartment buildings, and we're going to be adding some parking to the street. So obviously folks were excited about that. And then also the reallocation of the accessible parking spaces. We do know what the residents said. We did a parking study on those accessible parking spaces. No one was parking there. And that's just a waste of a resource. So the majority of feedback we received was, oh, this is actually great. It sounds good to me, especially when we explain what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Would any commissioner like to start with comments on this item?
Sure, I can start, because I live on Chase Street, and we had chicanes installed 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Jim.
And they do work. I mean, where we had cars going 50 miles an hour down the street, now it's a lot less. And anything that I think makes a driver stop and assess makes it safer, because they're taking a little more time. They're not just droning and listening to music or doing whatever they're doing. They're making a conscious effort to get through. So I like the idea too that it could be considered temporary or a demonstration to see if it works, and if it doesn't work, I agree with you that if there are some challenges that they can show us, other than, when I back out now, I have a car to look out because the person across the street had the same thing.
That's right.
Happens the same on our street. So,
That's right.
so yeah, I'm in support of this because it's on my street and it has made a marked improvement.
Important to point out here too, hands are not going to be off the wheel with this. Julia and Jack, I'm sure, will collect speed data after the install to make sure that we're having the effect that we want to.
That's all I have.
So I know this is an informal, bike corridor that a lot of residents and as well as permanent residents and college students use. So I appreciate the traffic calming there. I guess one question about, you said you spoke to the property owners, and I'm thinking of, the rubbish trucks that go, especially on the west side. It looks like there are a couple of big driveways, and I don't know if they come in on the west side. So there's clearance for them. You said you tested the turning.
That's
But I
correct.
think they might have enough space to not back out.
It's pretty amazing what those drivers can do.
Oh,
with
I've
those
seen,
giant trucks,
yeah.
let me tell you something. But we did look at some commercial driveways, did turning template analysis, and worked through some potential solutions. A couple of the more, like the apartment building near Pearl Street has a undersized curb cut. And so working with Caleb Manna and Alice Schwenke, who's the excavation inspector, they could potentially expand their curb cut if they need to. That's a potential solution for them.
Okay. And then in the rollout of this, what's the signage and communication for residents before, the ticketing
Right.
piece goes through. We just
Totally.
want to make sure that we're doing a really clear job, because this is, changing for folks who have lived on this street for 30 years,
Well, it's
since
something new.
1981, that when their visitors come, that it's really clear where they can now park and where they're not able to park, and that we're not going to tow right away.
Like anything that we do in the city, we don't work in silos. Mark Billadue's good parking services manager. We'll have a conversation with him once the signs do go up. There'll be some time for education, and parking services attendants are not walking around. They're not punitive. They're the nicest people, actually, and we'll be involved in that too, and make sure that folks kind of understand. Okay, well, here's these new signs. What do they mean? How does it work? And I don't think it'll take too long for folks to catch the drift. And we're not about towing people or slapping heavy fines on folks. There'll be an opportunity for education before the towing and the tickets.
And then, knowing that we're kind of close-ish to the end of the academic year for the university, there's, when is this planned to roll out? And then there's always like the re-education piece
Right.
as students move in or start new leases over the summer. So just making sure that we're hitting all
Yeah.
those pieces for an area that has a lot of student rentals.
It's a good point. I think maybe one thing we could do with the, there's a lot of tenants in apartment buildings, so the landlords, we could probably put together a one-pager, some kind of a flyer of some kind with a nice graphic. Jack could probably put that together and send that to those landlords and say, just make sure that when you send this packet of information to your new folks that are going to be renting, that they got a graphic with information on how your street works and why it's like this, and then you'll understand.
You have really good partners in UVM's off-campus life office who are always willing to lend a hand in disseminating info, so I think this would be ripe to loop them in on and see what they are capable of doing for us. They're always eager to send messages to avoid things like ticketing, towing, and promoting education, so that would be a great opportunity.
Okay, and then I think also then making sure that we're communicating the same thing with the full-time residents of that street as well.
Of course, yeah, for sure. Well, Rob and Jack touch base, and yep, absolutely.
Okay, that's all I have.
Commissioner Davis?
Thanks. So to make sure I understand this correctly, is it that there was not data suggesting the speed was an issue, but there was a resident or multiple resident complaints?
It's crashes.
Well, right. So,
Right.
yeah, so I'm wondering about the speed component.
Right, the speed component, what is this? 23.
I believe it's 24 miles per hour, and I just want to know, we installed a parking chicane on Bright Street under almost identical conditions. The 85th percentile speed was 24.
That's right.
There was a history of bicycle and pedestrian injury crashes.
Thank you, Julia.
We've long struggled to figure out how we can reduce speeds on low-volume streets that are already pretty low speed, and this seems to be the best low-cost solution to do that. We do have kind of neighborhood slow zones in Plan to be TV walk bike, where we're targeting for a design of 20 in certain streets. So that's kind of the context that we're working with.
So one of the reasons that I ask that is that I'm curious about the specific efficacy of the chicane in terms of stopping whatever the situation was that preceded or caused the pedestrian crash that did occur recently. Because while I can see that speed could have easily had something to do with it and may increase the likelihood of similar events, it could be that this particular crash occurred in such a way that a chicane or speed reduction would not have prevented it. So I'm just curious about that component.
Yeah, I think, as Julia said, pretty much identical conditions on another street, and about 24 miles an hour, Bright Street. Similar situation, not necessarily speeding, it's not over 25 miles an hour. It's also, Hungerford Terrace, narrow street, only 3 blocks long. I wouldn't want anybody going 25 down that narrow street, or 24, really. So, yeah, I think the efficacy is, we're looking at something we did on another street that was successful with similar conditions, and we're applying the same principles here.
And I
But-
think it
Go ahead,
creates,
Jack.
creates a situation that requires attention from the drivers a little more than just going straight down a street. And I think that's
Mhm.
where the efficacy of preventing crashes comes from. It's just requiring a little bit more, driver engagement. If that makes sense.
I guess to articulate this somewhat differently, the Bright Street situation, which I don't fully understand, but just based on, Julia, what you said a moment ago, it seems like that had multiple instances of bike and pedestrian crashes, whereas the Hungerford Terrace situation was one crash with injury. I don't know, based on the public comment, I don't know if there were more crashes, so I'm curious about that. Meaning, I don't know that the two streets are as similar as they could be. And this is not to say that a chicane is a bad idea or anything, but it's more kind of just sussing out and getting more information that's responsive to the public comments, which, again, is not the only members of the public that interacted with you, so I don't mean to suggest that that's the case. But were there other crash instances that were on Hungerford Terrace?
There were other just property damage only crashes, but there was just the one pedestrian injury crash.
Okay. All right, so yeah, I'm still supportive of the chicane, but I think, better understand a little bit why the residents that did provide the public comments did so in the fashion that they did. But I think, in general, reducing speeds and increasing attention is a good idea. So thank you.
So I guess I want to speak to what Julia said about the designing for 20 miles per hour. Does Hungerford Terrace or part of it fall within that designated downtown boundary?
I think it's one block away.
I think it's one block away.
Yeah.
Union Street, I think,
Yeah.
is the boundary.
Okay.
So it's not
Yeah.
within the 20 mile per hour zone.
Okay. Just curious. Pretty close.
It is close.
Yeah, I mean, I'm supportive of this. I lived on Hungerford Terrace for a year in college, and that apartment building on the corner of Pearl Street. It's also one of the only streets I've ever, when I was biking to work one time, a driver pulled up right next to me and like cursed me out while I was biking, like just like really super aggressive behavior. And so, yeah, that's just like purely my personal experience. And so I feel like this is warranted, and I appreciate what you said about it being inexpensive, nimble, like we can try it out and see how it goes, and if it turns out it doesn't work, we can always change it. It's a nice thing about these kinds of initiatives. So yeah, that's all I had. Okay. Is there any motion on this item? Do we need to do public comment on it again?
It's not, I don't think so. No.
Okay.
You don't have to, no.
Okay.
I'm gonna make a motion to accept staff's proposal for the demonstration, the trial period.
I'll second the motion for the chicanes on Hungerford.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye for myself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is the Battery Street Preferred Alternative approval.
Wonderful. Hello, my name is Julia Ursaki, Public Works Engineer. I'm very excited to be here to talk to you guys about our Battery Street scoping study. I'm just going to share my screen here. I have a presentation. I will try to be brief, and then we can hopefully have some discussion. And we are requesting a motion of your support tonight that we can bring to the City Council when we go to get to seek approval for the preferred alternative in April.
And the motion is in the packet if you want to consider such a motion.
All right, so just a really brief agenda of what we're going to talk about tonight. We'll do an overview of the project, talk about our alternatives development, some of the additional analysis that we did after getting feedback, what the recommended preferred alternative is, and then some time for questions. So we had a really great team working on this project, our consultants from VHB. This was also funded through the CCRPC, so we had their project management assistants, and then Philip and I from the city side. We had a great dedicated advisory committee for this project with members from other city departments, the Wards 3 and 5 NPAs, and Chris from Green Mountain Transit, who also ended up representing this commission once or Commissioner Hogan had stepped down. So the overall purpose of the Battery Street Scoping Study was to identify improvements that provide equitable, safe, low stress, and accessible transportation for all on Battery Street. The need for the project was to improve safety along the corridor, enhance comfort and accessibility for pedestrians, provide a continuous end-to-end facility for bikes, to integrate street ecology into Battery Street's design, being so close to the lake, and also to provide acceptable mobility for all modes. We do recognize this corridor as very important for commuters of all types. Some of the community engagement we did as part of this scoping study, we hosted 2 public meetings in City Hall, one at the beginning to hear local concerns, and then a presentation of the alternatives. We had 4 meetings of the advisory committee. We did several targeted outreach events that included, we tabled at King Street Laundry to talk to people as they came in. We tabled in Battery Park. We went to the Burlington City and Lake semester to talk to high school students and events like that. And then we had an online survey that was open for several months too, getting input from the community. Some of the key takeaways from that engagement included just generally people not feeling safe on Battery Street along the whole corridor, and trying to improve that, improving the pedestrian experience, having a dedicated place to bike. Cars can go pretty fast, and we know people didn't feel comfortable biking next to them. We also heard desires for connecting the community better through Battery Street. It really bisects downtown in the waterfront, and it's a key corridor throughout our city that we need to think about crossing and getting through. Improving transit accommodations, and then finally streetscape improvements. Right now it can feel like a bit of a sea of pavement rather than a really inviting streetscape when you're out on Battery. So the alternatives that we considered. We have distinguished the 2 alternatives by the type of bike facilities. So alternative 1 has a separated bike lane on either side of the street in one direction. We widened the sidewalks wherever we could. Alternative 1 did remove parking from one side of the street and the 2 southern blocks. For both alternatives, or all alternatives, I'll say, we are proposing lane reductions on Battery Street. I know this graphic is very small, but there's 3 lanes pretty much at every intersection because of the turning movements. But elsewhere, we have narrowed all the way down to 2 lanes where we can. And then our traffic analysis also included looking at improvements for pedestrians at the signals, so that we looked at different types of pedestrian phasing and extending the leading pedestrian interval at all of the signals along Battery Street. Alternative 2 is a two-way separated bike lane on the west side of Battery Street. So that's the top. In this picture, that's the same side that the lake is on. That is 12. It got widened in a couple areas. We also looked at widening the sidewalk where we could. And Alternative 2 is also able to maintain parking on both sides of the street in the 2 southern blocks. and it has a pretty much identical traffic lane configuration to alternative 1. So some of the input that we heard about our 2 alternatives, both do increase the amount of time that it takes cars to get through the corridor, and we did hear some concerns about that. Especially from the business community, we heard concerns over impacts to parking. Originally, alternative 2 actually had 4 lanes at College Street, which you can kind of see in the bottom picture there, which is a major crossing, so we did rethink that. It's 3 in the final revised alternative 2. We also heard about safety concerns. One thing that several people brought up was conflicts between biking on the 2-way bike lane. If you're going downhill really fast versus going uphill much slower, what would that look like? And in alternative 1, because you're crossing so many more streets, just the way that Battery Street is a T, the northbound bikes have to cross Cherry and Pearl, where the 2-way on the west side does not. We also heard about impacts to Battery Park, considerations around maintenance, and then from our advisory committee, we had a desire to consider one additional alternative, which is a hybrid alternative 3 that actually looked at a 2-way bike lane on the east side of the street for the lower 2 blocks. This was intended to save space, to preserve some parking, and also connect to a potential future shared use path along the Rail Yard Enterprise project. And then splitting up at a 2-stage crossover at the Main Street intersection and going to that alternative 1 with a bike lane on either side of the street. So again, the same traffic lane configuration, but the type of bike facility is what's varying. So this is what our evaluation matrix looked like for the alternatives. Unfortunately, all of the alternatives have a really high price tag and are challenging to construct, so this is like a major construction project that we'd be looking at for downtown. We'll get into this a little more in the coming slides, but the traffic impacts for alternative 1 were much more significant than 2 or 3 because of the way the bike signals had to work. But otherwise, we felt that all alternatives met the purpose and need of our study. So some of the additional analysis that we did, our consultant likes to joke that this became like a traffic study rather than a scoping study because of the amount of traffic analysis that was involved in this. So this chart is showing the number of minutes it would take for a car to get from Maple Street to Park Sherman Street if they're going along Battery Street. I had mentioned alternative 1 had higher delays because we are holding vehicle traffic, especially right turners, while the bikes get to go, so that bikes can avoid some of those safety conflicts. Alternative 2 had a bit more of a balanced result, and then alternative 3 had a much higher impact for northbound traffic, and that's because the northbound bike lane is still on the east side, north of Main Street. So I had mentioned we took a closer look at alternative 2, and we were able to narrow the lanes down at the College and Battery intersection so that it was only a 3-lane cross-section there. We looked at parking in the 2 southern blocks, which originally we had proposed taking away parking on one side for both alternative 1 and 2, and later we figured out we could keep parking on both sides for alternative 2, similar to the layout that was shown in alternative 3, where it's on the east side of the street. We looked at narrowing the path to the extent that we could in the vicinity of Battery Park to limit impacts to the park. We had many conversations with the business owners at April Cornell about how this would impact their frontage. And one comment they made about alternative 2 was that they didn't want it to feel like a bike highway as soon as they open their door. They do want more store frontage outside of their door. They do also like the parking that they have out there now, but I think they do understand it's city right of way, and we did everything we could to give them as much space as possible to activate the space. We can work with them to plant gardens, or they can have little sidewalk racks, or they just have more frontage space now. Because of that concern about the side-by-side uphill and downhill riding, we took a closer look at the width available for that long section. That's a pretty steep hill between Main and Pearl. And we added a bit of a median. It would probably be a painted median for maintenance, but just so that there's a little more separation between the bikes going downhill really fast and the uphill riders. And we also widened the uphill lane to 8 feet, so that if somebody needed to pass, there would be enough space, and just so people riding uphill feel more comfortable. We also really zeroed in on safety considerations, and our consultant kind of did some research. The most prevalent type of crashes for bicycles are the right and left hooks, where they're going straight and a car is turning, and they're either looking for different oncoming traffic or just miss that the bike is there. So this type of crash would definitely be more prominent in alternative 1, being that it has to cross more of the side streets than alternative 2, being on the west side. So taking all this into consideration, the advisory committee and the project team agreed that alternative 2 would ultimately be the recommended preferred alternative. So that's the 2-way bike lane on the west side of the street. This was for many reasons. It did best meet the purpose and need. The chart on the right is the results from our public survey. So it did have the most community support, endorsed by the advisory committee. It had the fewest minimized impacts to delay while still maintaining safety, less conflict potential, like I just discussed. And we also had made several design modifications based on a lot of the input that we got. So that's the study and the results of the study. One other thing I'll mention about our preferred alternative is that we fully understand and recognize this does make it will make it more challenging to turn into downtown if you're going northbound, because you're now on the opposite side of the street. We intentionally did not include this really detailed level of intersection design in the scoping study, just because it would have become too much. But we do want to be very intentional about how those bicyclists could cross Battery Street and get into downtown with the 2-way bike lane on the west side. So that is on our radar. So next steps, we are going to the City Council on April 14th to seek approval of the study overall and the preferred alternative. We do, recognizing this is, a $30 million construction project, we are exploring interim solutions, so basically implementing a road diet with bike lanes within the existing curb-to-curb width, which we do know is feasible from all of the traffic analysis. We just have to take a closer look at our signals and what they're capable of, and we've applied for technical assistance from CCRPC to do that in fiscal year 26. And so we will work with them on a design and a plan for the signals to kind of get a cost estimate and then seek funds to implement something in the short term that doesn't cost quite as much. And then long term, we will have Battery Street on the list for future grant opportunities, for a project of that scale. But of course, balancing that among the city's many priorities around the city. So thank you very much for listening, and happy to have some discussion.
Take the presentation down so folks can see if they're online.
Yes.
Do any commissioners want to start?
I can start.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Julia, for this. So I guess I want to hear, I mean, I know you said it's on your radar, but what about the signaling for cyclists to cross from the west side of Battery to get into downtown? I mean, as a cyclist, usually there's like, you know, kind of a big jog, especially if you're, like, I'm thinking of Cherry Street in particular, like if you're going
Yes.
up that kind of side path, and
Yep.
it will be great to hear how that's gonna.
Sure. So our intention and what we've done in the traffic model is to basically do a leading bike phase, like a leading pedestrian interval, where bikes get like a, I think, 7 to 11 second head start. Because if you're waiting to cross the street, regardless, we expect kind of bikes to hopefully be queued and waiting, and many could get across during a leading bike interval. And the other design consideration is basically putting like a little, it's not the same as a 2-stage left turn box, but it's like a little box where bikes coming southbound can kind of get out of the southbound lane and wait to turn. So it's just like an extra space for bikes to queue up to get across the street and not be in the way of other bikes.
Yeah, because I could imagine anyone who bikes is imagining a bit of a cluster.
Yeah.
Especially the southbound.
Yes.
And when you say an advanced signal, is there going to be a specific bike signal for the bike crossing across Battery?
That is our intention. We haven't gotten to that level of design detail, but that's how we modeled it, and that's what we're thinking from our scoping study. I will say in Main Street, they decided to forego the bike signals, and they're having pedestrians and bikes both use the pedestrian signal. That's not what we had intended on Battery Street, but it is something we're doing on another street in the city, so just keeping that in mind.
I'm sure you have, like, you dropped the tubes and had bike counts. Maybe not.
We do not have bike counts on Battery, unfortunately.
I imagine that there is a potential for huge conflict with bikes and pedestrians crossing Main Street at the same time, especially if this now becomes an actual network connecting piece instead of just like, oh, you got to kind of figure it out. So I think, you know, putting on the radar or on the front burner instead of the back burner, kind of figuring out those conflicts of bikes and pedestrians in a kind of a really integrated. I mean, I'm happy to take a field trip to Copenhagen if anyone wants. There's some fantastic. Okay, yeah, we'll sign up.
Yeah.
They've got them in Eugene, Oregon.
Fantastic. Copenhagen's better. There's some fantastic signaling, so that it's crystal clear, because I think it will take cyclists and pedestrians a while to kind of figure, oh, I can go here now
Yes.
or not.
Yes.
And then I think, in particular, coming from the west side, again, thinking about Cherry Street in particular, and you have someone bombing down the hill, which is great, they're catching speed, and then someone waiting to turn, could you imagine? And then if you're biking with kids, I'm just saying.
Yes, absolutely. We did think about that. We started to think about asking our consultant to do more detailed designs for the intersections, but it snowballs really quickly because you have to look at grading and exactly how much space is available. But the intention would be for that to be like the major, because the traffic analysis is already done, the cross-section is already done, but that would be like the major focus of the design phase is like how to make the intersections safe for all users, but especially bikes and pedestrians.
And oh God, I don't even know how to say this. I guess I'm just gonna say it. Would there be a recommended, let's say, speed cap, speed limit for the downhill? I mean, just there are a lot more e-bikes, and if you have a class 3 e-bike going down the hill,
Mm-hmm.
that's heavy, so 65, 70 pounds, potentially going 25 miles an hour with someone riding. I just to maybe think of the whole range of users on that space. I know that
Yes.
technically, do we have a?
We're working through that with
Okay.
the Walk Bike Council right now. Actually, Caleb and I are working.
Do you want to go up to the microphone?
Sure.
We're not picking people up if they're not at the microphone.
Hello, Philip Peterson. Caleb and I, Associate Engineer, we're working with the Walk Bike Council on developing ordinance language around those very things, because technically none of that's defined right now. And it's in process, so.
I mean, it's easy to bomb down like on a regular
Sure.
bike and you're going, 28 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But with an e-bike, then you're just adding additional weight and.
It's true. And you can go just as fast on a regular bike going downhill as you can on an e-bike. Going down Battery Street on a regular bike, you could pick up a decent amount of speed.
I know.
And I know there were similar concerns on Main Street, which is also pretty steep, and there were kind of like some chicanes, I'll say, in the bike lane at intersections, so that bikes, that kind of like more of a natural traffic calming rather than trying to enforce bike speed limits, which I don't think
Right.
we've figured out how to
Right.
do quite yet.
And
So-
don't put bumps. UVM on campus, do you remember where they put these bumps, which were just the dumbest thing? So don't put bumps.
Some of them were actually divots.
Yeah, they were divots, and so
Oh.
you're on your bike, and then you're just like,
Bending.
and you get it up and downhill.
Yes, definitely.
So I think there are others.
Understood.
Okay. Thanks. So the signaling, crossing, and this might be a business question rather than a city question. But is there a plan to at least advocate for increased bike parking along Battery Street at the businesses? I just feel like for people who are always in their vehicles, they think bicycles, like we're just out kind of having fun and we don't spend money. I spend actually quite a bit of money. My hairstylist is down there. You can't tell right now. So just thinking, like, if this really is, if we're looking at this, which is fantastic, a network instead of, this idea where like, gosh, you're on the bunny hill and all of a sudden, you're on an expert trail, but you are actually able to connect to other bike lanes and stop and spend your money and support our local businesses. It would be great that the infrastructure supports those users and that there
Yes. Absolutely. We will add that to the list. I think it's part of every great streets design, is looking at amenities like bike parking. But yeah, absolutely.
And the zoning code has been strengthened over many years to require it on a parcel when businesses redevelop.
And then my last point is the maintenance. As we, as a city, having these great streets and these great projects, the maintenance piece needs to be manageable enough and fit within our ability to pay for it, to be able to maintain it, so that if that is a bike lane for those people who bike year-round, that is an accessible space for us to utilize.
Yes. One point about the two-way versus the one-way bike lanes is that the two-ways are actually easier to plow because you can do it with a plow truck, versus the one-way, they're narrower and probably would require the sidewalk plows, which move slower and are a little harder to maneuver. So,
And there would be like full clearance as opposed to you plow the bike lane and then you still have like 2 feet of slurry.
well, there
Right.
wouldn't be curbs, so that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could see the job we did with the Champlain Parkway shared use path this year, where we were able to get the full, 8 to 10 feet clear. And the nice thing about the two-way bike lane on the west side is there's so many fewer curb cuts that it really enables us to better maintain the facility. It's the streets like North Union that we've tried to maintain with all the curb cuts that vexes us. So that's one of the reasons why staff is very supportive of 2 over 1, is because it's going to be easier to maintain.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all.
Any commissioners want to go next?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
So my hairstylist is also downtown.
Me too, actually.
It is. He is. I'm real excited about this project, and that is the Battery Street is a way that I usually go by bike when I'm going down to the waterfront or connecting. And I love the idea of using actual bike signaling too. You saw it in Denmark, and I did mention Eugene because very much like Battery Street, if you've been to Eugene has a street called High Street, which was very much the same way. It was a thoroughfare, and they did something very similar to this. And it all around Eugene and University of Oregon, it's just, they did a really great job. And I love the idea of this. And you answered, or at least the slide showed, whenever you get on something like this, which is going to be really great, when you get to the end of it, how does it connect to something else?
Yeah.
And so I like that it's on the west side, so it'll go by Battery Park and hopefully seamlessly connect in to the bike lane onto North Avenue, so that's great. On the south side, we'll just have to see, I guess, with the Champlain Parkway and that whole thing happening. But connecting, somebody else had told me that it's great to have such a all connection as opposed to dotted. So
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think this is really gonna help. And the intersections, I really do think that those need to be the focus of the designs.
Agreed.
So that's pretty much it. It's a great idea.
Thank you. Thanks.
Commissioner Davis?
The snow plowing aspect did make me think back about the Hungerford Terrace question. Does the use of the chicane affect the snow plowing situation on that street?
For Hungerford Terrace.
Well, if they need to remove snow, they remove parking, right? There's snow bans. So-
Right, yeah, I was wondering if the snow ban, I guess, had to be enforced before, with it being one way, with all parking on one side. If that would change how it is now.
I can say it works on my street, and I have a chicane.
Okay,
So-
yeah, just completely a curiosity, because I've not lived on a street with a chicane, and just didn't know.
It's a good question.
But jumping to the actual matter at hand with the Battery Street proposal, yeah, I think the alternative two with the revisions is really great. I think the combined bike path, I share some of the concerns that my fellow commissioners have raised about kind of the turns and interaction of bikes on the bike path. I think there is something to be said for, which I suspect is not part of the stage we're in yet, but like things that help people know what to anticipate and what to expect. So things like the separate turning areas and
Right.
Being able to kind of alert people to situations that are ahead of them. Like completely a zany idea, but I even wonder if like letting people know if street parking was available before they turn onto the street might have an effect on whether people choose to actually go that route rather than like going a different route and picking a side street and then walking over to like Newport Cornell or Burlington Bay. But anyway, I know that's a zany idea. I've never heard of it being implemented anywhere, but outside of like parking garages. But The main question I had, which I think is again not part of like the scoping study, so please feel free to just tell me not known yet, but with the construction, at the point where we would go into construction, what kind of effect would it have on people traveling on Battery Street? Like, would we need to do something similar to the Winooski Bridge, where there's kind of like a route around for people, or would it not have an effect because it's already wide enough? I'm not sure.
It's a great question that we certainly have not worked out those details yet, but it was another more attractive part of Alternative 2, that most of the construction is on one side of the street and the curb stays in the same place, in some cases on the east side. So we do think it could, be less impactful, but as we've seen with Great Streets projects in our downtown, they certainly are very disruptive, and we are very sensitive to that. And I don't have answers, but I don't think we would close Battery Street long-term for this kind of construction.
Okay, awesome.
One piece to add, and that the larger multi-million-dollar project is many years to come. There will be a new through street in our downtown on Pine Street with the opening of City Place. So one of the things we're sensitive to is the lack of a real grid system downtown. There will be more of a grid system on St. Paul and Pine by the time this project reaches construction, which will also be a benefit.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's a great point that I hadn't considered. With the intention of the way the bike path will work being separate from the roadway, when it has intersections, I'm a little curious about how it's intended to work with, like, would there be signals on the bike path itself for the bike path, or would it only be signals when it's interfacing with the vehicular traffic?
We did also plan for signals crossing the side streets along Battery Street, if that's what you mean. So not just crossing Battery Street, but also like at College and Main, where you're crossing the side street. We had a similar configuration with the leading bike interval and holding right turns, so they're not conflicting when the bikes are going.
Okay, because part of my concern, which I think is solved like by this approach, but it would be cases where people are kind of rushing to get across on the bike, but someone in front of them might be stopping for some reason, and it might be kind of hard to adjust. And then if you have to stop in a travel lane, then that would be potentially an issue. But it sounds like that. I think with the space in between the streets as well, there's probably not much of a concern. But with just the speed, knowing going down Battery Street, how fast you can get going on the bike easily.
Yes, definitely.
I do wonder about that, but I think that's like beyond the scoping study aspect and more into the traffic aspect, and will likely be resolved. Okay, well, I'm very supportive, and I think that's all I've got, so thank you very much. It's a really cool project to read about.
Thank you.
I too am really excited about this project. I showed up to the local concerns meeting right when it started, and I talked to you guys and the consultants for like 2 hours because, I bike this corridor quite frequently, and the big point being that like right now it is awful, and anything we do to improve it is going to be massive. So that I think regardless of what the alternative is, it's going to be a positive change. And for me, the recommended alternative, it's great. It represents a compromise. I think everyone involved is like, okay, I have to give a little something, but it's going to be for the benefit of all of us. So, I feel like very positive about it. I will echo what Commissioner O'Neill Vivanco said about you know, the signage and sort of the bike parking aspects of it. The other thing, and I know this is like outside the realm of the study, but it's something I brought up to VHB at the local concerns meeting like 2 years ago, was that there are tons of other like parking structures really close to Battery Street, and I would love for those to be like promoted as part of this, because we're losing like a little bit of on-street parking, right? Not a lot,
Yes.
but like a
Yeah.
tiny bit. And if that's like I think, you know, a legitimate concern for the businesses, like there's tons of parking
Mhm.
adjacent, tons of it.
That downtown garage.
The downtown garage, thank you. But also, you know, the other public parking like near Perkins Pier and stuff like that, so, you know, if that can somehow be incorporated in the future, as far as like wayfinding or whatever. And then the last thing, and you'd think I would know this by now, but, and it's super specific, so at the Sherman Street intersection, if you're a northbound biker and you're trying to like make that left onto the Sherman Street existing bike lane, are you doing that on the pedestrian signal? Because right now, we're in the alternative.
Mhm.
I'm just envisioning like, if you're in the bike path, right, and you're trying to make that left
Mhm.
onto Sherman Street headed towards BPD, you're either dealing with Sherman Street right turns or Battery Street left turns. So
Mhm.
when and how does a biker make that turn?
So one thing I didn't explicitly point out is that we are recommending removing the slip lane from Sherman onto Battery, so it's consolidated in just a normal
Right.
intersection. I do think we would do a leading bike interval
Okay.
there as well. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do know that VHB was using kind of like national best practice for like the number of conflicting vehicle movements versus like a protected bike
Yeah.
phase needed for all the intersections. Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious, because as long as there's like something, because like without
Yes.
that leading bike interval,
Yeah.
there's like no way to get out, and so yeah, I don't know, that just caught my eye. Anyway, that was the only question I had. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Any comment from the public on this item?
We do not have anyone signed up.
Okay.
I did have one other comment, if I
Go for it.
could.
Yeah.
One other reason I really like alternative 2 is that not only is the travel time for vehicles kept most similar to the current situation, but it also has them being most equal southbound and northbound. And I think for people's expectations and frustration, it'll be greatly reduced when there's not like a lopsided effect of that. So another reason why I think the preferred alternative is better than the other ones.
That's a good point. Okay. Is there any motion around
Motion.
the recommended language in our packet?
I'd like to make the motion, the Public Works Commission approve and recommend that the City Council approve the Battery Street Scoping Study Project Advisory Committee selection of revised alternative 2 as the preferred alternative for this.
I'll second that motion.
A lot of words in there.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye for myself, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay.
Exciting, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Julia.
Great work.
And we are on to item 6, which is our 2025 paving update.
Great. Excited to have the paving team come up and give a brief overview. Do we have copies of the
We do.
council memo to distribute to commissioners? This was just finalized for the Monday's council meeting, maybe an hour ago, a couple hours ago. So apologies for this not getting in the packet. We'll, Rob, has it been uploaded now? Yeah. Great. And given the bond approvals and kind of how we're going to phase that work, it's important that we communicate with you and the public about what to expect moving forward. So thanks for making time for this.
Thanks, Chapin.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caleb Manna, Associate Public Works Engineer for the Department of Public Works. And I'm here to talk to you tonight about our CY25 paving contract and kind of our plans for paving around Burlington this year. To start, I'd just like to rewind to last year's contract that, fortunately for us in the city, we had a little bit extra money and are going to do some paving on the Beltline from the intersection of Manhattan across the railroad bridge and just to what I've been calling the Sea Caves, just before the North Ave exit. There's a nice little pavement joint. That particular section of roadway is in poor condition. It's something we had on our radar and we're fortunately able to address with the remaining funds from the CY24 paving contract. So I just wanted to mention that because that will happen this year, likely around June, but it is not part of this contract we're here to talk about tonight. And yes, as Chapin mentioned, we've been busy putting together memos, bids, contracts, and all that fun stuff. We did go out to bid with our paving contract, and we do have an apparent low bidder of SD Ireland Brothers. We were actually fairly pleased with the pricing we received this year. That was kind of one big unknown we had with a lot of economic uncertainty, a lot of other work going on. We were really interested to see what kind of pricing we would get, and ultimately we were pleased. It's very much in line with prices we've seen in previous years. So there was no shock and awe factor on the price tag, and it's very reflective of the work that we've asked the contractor to perform. So with that, our plans for this year, we will be doing some paving on Archibald Street, starting at Spring Street. We're going to dip into Walnut Street a little bit. I've kind of been calling Archibald and Walnut two separate streets. Will kind of be done concurrently for all extensive purposes. I believe it's Dewey Park there, the small triangular park where Walnut Street dives into. We're going to take out a small section of sidewalk that's in pretty poor condition on, let's see, the north side of the park, so it would be the east side, so it would be the west side of Walnut Street. That was something we talked to our partners at Parks about. The collective feeling was removing the sidewalk would really help direct people into and through Dewey Park.
Sorry, just gonna jump in real quick. Just real quick clarification for that is that it's technically a concrete apron that Dewey Park has around it. It's not formally a sidewalk, and it's old infrastructure, and it's not ADA compliant, and therefore it's not meant to be a sidewalk, so it's being removed in Dewey Park. But it will create additional green space within the park.
All of the streets we're working on this year, and I'll continue on the street list in a minute, pay particular attention to sidewalk and ADA crossings. As we work to develop this list, work to identify our streets, really started to put together these plans, it became very apparent to us that most, if not all, of the sidewalks that abut and intersect those streets are in poor condition. So to be compliant with our complete street standards, to meet ADA accessible regulations, and to work towards the city ADA transition plan, we felt it was prudent to incorporate, again, most if not all of the sidewalks that are non-compliant that will intersect our streets. So continuing up Archibald, this is all our typical 1.5" mill and fill paving, so we just scrape off the top 1.5" of pavement, put another layer down. That's what we consider the wearing course. So that's where the larger degradation, the imperfections that we see occur on the street. There are a lot of additional traffic calming features that will be implemented on Archibald. As we continue up the street, we'll get to the intersection of Intervale and Archibald, where a larger bump out will be constructed on the southwest corner of Intervale. And we will continue up. There'll be another small bump out at the intersection of St. Louis Street. Actually not in St. Louis, but across the street. And there'll be 2 speed tables installed about mid-block on Archibald, kind of where, I'm not sure if it's still there, but it was Green Mountain Power Supply, just west of Bright Street. So there'll be 2 speed tables there. Again, following our typical standards for speed tables. So there's nothing out of the ordinary there. Very consistent with all the speed tables we've constructed in the past.
Can I ask you a question
Sure.
about how we're defining speed tables? Because I have this issue on Prospect Street. Speed cushion, speed hump, speed bump, speed table. We've covered all the, furniture in our living room. So just wondering.
Important distinction. There is a difference.
Okay.
Speed table, and correct me if I'm wrong here, anyone, but 6 to 8 foot approach, 10-foot table, and that is 6 inches above street grade. So these are the more even, very similar to Pine Street. Yeah. So they're much more. It's a gentler approach too. It's not quite as abrupt.
Birchcliff Parkway, raised crosswalks, similar geometry.
Okay.
Standiford Road was one we built last year, 2 actually, so they will all fall in line with those. But yes, speed table versus speed bump.
Yes.
Very different things, so thanks for pointing that out. Great, and I'll keep moving through the list here. So Archibald Walnut would be number 1. The big one we have on the docket this year will be Pearl Street. And we are planning to pave from Battery Street to the intersection of Winooski. Big street, it's a pretty busy street. We're not planning to change or reconfigure the existing layout, so all the line striping, all the bike lanes, the parking meters, all that type of thing will remain as it is currently, as you see today. It'll just be nice fresh paint, new crosswalks, new stop bars, that type of thing, new ADA sidewalks, so not a huge change to the existing streetscape. But will certainly require some coordination being in the heart of our downtown too. We had previously done some paving on the eastern section of Pearl Street last year, so we felt this would really nicely tie the rest of one of our major arterial collector streets with some new pavement. Also on our list is College Street from Hungerford Terrace up to South William Street. We will be refreshing the bike lane that currently exists on the south side there and getting rid of some of the terrible speed bumps, or potholes that exist there.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it has not been kind to bikers for the last couple of weeks, but so it's a fairly short street segment, and again, we'll link some recent paving we had done on College Street. Further to the west by the old YMCA a couple years ago, and then more recently up by UVM and William Street. This is kind of our last missing segment on College Street before we get into the heart of the downtown. Also on our list this year, we will have Cliff Street, Burlington's steepest hill. That whole entire roadway, we had tried to do some additional patching last year just to keep limping it along. The roadway itself is in extremely poor condition. Being one of the steeper hills in Burlington, it's important to have that in good shape for safety reasons, especially during the winter time. It's a fairly small street, not super wide. It's about 20 feet wide on the narrower section, and then it widens up to about 25 Street, going from Willard to South Prospect. And finally, make sure I didn't miss anything here.
Traffic calming.
Yep. So in supplement to our typical 1.5-inch mill and fill pavement resurfacing, we have some plans to do some traffic calming and pedestrian improvements under this contract on Ethan Allen Parkway. I would strongly encourage folks in this room to stay tuned into the city council meeting next week. That'll be, again, a very similar presentation to this. That particular plan set we've gone out to bid with really does a good job in showing exactly where the 5 speed tables on Ethan Allen Parkway will be installed. So there's 2 kind of at the beginning of Ethan Allen Parkway as it abuts North Avenue. By the park there and Walgreens, I believe. Continuing down, we don't have any traffic calming features for a little bit until we get to the Farrington Parkway neighborhood and we start to get closer to CP Smith School. So in that location, we have some pedestrian crosswalk improvements, we have a raised intersection, and one final speed table as we continue down Ethan Allen Parkway and head towards Gazo Ave, and a little bit of pavement patching resurfacing. So that's kind of our traffic calming plan. The last thing to add to this contract is it does incorporate a few streets for patching. These are more, excuse me, the patches we have our contractor do are a little more robust than our streets right-of-way team are equipped to do. They have different equipment, it's a little more specialized, it's more ideal to do a larger swath of pavement patches. So we've identified Battery Street, actually, that we were just talking about. There's some pretty significant seam rutting, actually on both lanes in between Maple Street and Main Street. So we will mill out that big center rut and probably extend our cut a couple feet on the other side just to really make sure we're capturing that condition, and then just fill it in too. So the intent of this is really just to add a little more life to the street before we're ready to do these more robust, larger reconstruction or resurfacing projects. We also have identified Pine Street, pretty close to our building here, just to the south by Noise. We've noticed some fairly significant degradation to that surface layer that we'd like to address before it gets any worse. We have identified a spot on South of Union Street, just to the south of Maple Street. We will be doing some patching on Loomis Street. Very similar condition to Battery Street, pretty significant rut of the middle seam that will be milled out. We will be doing a portion on Arlington Court in the new north end. That's probably the most robust patch of the contract, full width curb to curb, and captures about a 50 to 75 foot area that had been missed in previous years. And I think that's about it for our paving contract for CY25. So I'm happy to take any questions and answer as best we can.
And I think the important context here is that this is the base paving contract that we were planning on. Town meeting day vote just occurred. We had to put something out to bid to get into a competitive bidding environment. We basically bid out what we knew we had. The enhanced funding, thanks to voter support, will increase the paving program in calendar year 26, 27, and 28. So this year's contract is a little thin in terms of mileage, a bit over a mile. We need to hit around 4 miles a year to have a sustainable program. So you're going to see a more robust paving program next year.
Thanks, Chip. And just to add on that quickly, we've really been working to identify what that's going to look like, trying to build out and forecast what streets we're going to be working on from FY26 to FY29, and really trying to get a bigger picture of where our work lies ahead of us. That being said, paving is always a moving target. We understand that roads degrade quicker than others for a variety of factors. So it's always a fluid list. Things rise and fall on that priority list based on a variety of factors. So, we certainly recognize that and want to be able to respond to those things that pop up quickly and streets that need immediate attention.
I'm going to start because I have some softball, but I feel are super important questions. If my street is not on this list and it's in really poor condition, what should I do? Is it still going to get worked on at all over the summer after the winter?
Well, where do you live?
Well, that was just an example, right? Sorry. That was just to make the point that there are a lot of streets that are not on this list that have giant potholes after the winter. I'm thinking of Manhattan because I bike that every day. And so, yeah, I assume that it's a C-Quick Fix submission, and our streets team is still going to go out and fill those potholes just because they're not on the list.
It's a piece of it. We certainly have the ability to fill in potholes, and C-Click Fix is a great tool to report that. What we're trying to move away from a little bit is the continuous refilling of that same pothole year after year. And what that will look like is really coordination with our streets crews. They do have some equipment that will allow us to do a more robust repair. And again, along the lines of the patching work we do in this contract, we expand those limits and really try to get ahead of cracking to the left and the right of that patch. We try to pick a good spot that has strong asphalt to tie into. And we try to key it in, just give it a little bit of extra layer to kind of make it stable so that it doesn't keep falling apart. But that being said, there are a lot of streets in Burlington. We do only have so much funds. We can't reasonably get to everybody. It's the other reason we want to build out this list. But, you know, a lot of these streets, they're really prioritized on the PCI, so that's the pavement condition index, the ultimate assessment that defines a numerical number to the street pavement condition. We look at things like how busy of a street is it? Is there other work that's scheduled to occur on that street? Are there future plans? Are there other maybe private development projects that would be required to do some additional right-of-way work? So things like that. Cost of the streets is a big one too. Obviously, the longer the street, the more it costs. So finding street segments that fall within our budget is also another one of the factors we consider.
Stealing the mic just so I make it heard. Sorry. Corey Mims, Senior Public Works Engineer. I'll work with them. Also to that, yes, C-Click Fix, to your question, is the way in which people who have concerns about the road and want to get it voiced, please continue to do so. That is used, what Caleb said. Our street folks will go and do a temporary patching of those to make them serviceable. And it gets it on our list as well as ones that we look to see how the condition has changed versus what data we have collected. Another good location to look at is when the GO bond was going forward, our capital team did put together a mapping of streets based upon the PCI information that we have, and that is available on GIS online. I believe if you go through the DPW's website, there is a link that gets us to that ArcGIS, and I recommend folks that want to see where their street list sits on that list as identified based upon our previous 2024 information. That is identified there as well, and per that information, you'll see that we do have over 10 miles of Burlington city streets that do fall in a lower serviceable level of PCI, unfortunately, and that's what we're trying to remedy. And so I just want to add that a little bit plug for the online resources as well to see what we have identified in case you feel that a street is being missed, as well as the C-Click Fix.
That's great, thank you. My next question was about, you know, I think we've talked about the prioritization and how the decisions are made as far as what gets on the list, so thanks for that. I guess another question I had was, I guess, just the VTrans small scale bike ped grant. I'm just wondering which project that's for.
That's for Ethan Allen Parkway.
Okay.
That was a grant Philip and Julia and their team were able to secure. So yeah, that was that's another factor that would play into our decision making too. Yeah, our ability to secure grants
totally.
And get that extra funding too. So if we're able to go down that route, then great, it's a good benefit. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's a big deciding factor for us.
Yeah, thanks. I was just curious what that was for. Okay, and then the last thing, I know that managing contractors can be really fickle, and you're sometimes not sure when the timing of paving's going to happen or like when the milling's going to happen, but I think just communicating as far in advance as we can, particularly for our public transit partners, is super important. I think Pearl Street last year, between like Pearl Street and Main Street, there were some issues there, I think. So just making sure we're staying on top of that as soon as we know when the paving's happening. Like I said, I know it's like, you might not know until like the day ahead before, and
One,
Yeah.
We
one
didn't pick the easiest street.
One benefit to the contractor, with SD Ireland being the low bid that we are looking to award the contract to, they are also managing the Main Street project. As
Okay.
part of the Main Street's coordination with public notification, there is also a GIS map that shows work zones and traffic detours through the downtown corridor.
Mhm.
It's likely that we anticipate that the Pearl Street work would also be coordinated in that to show when there are restrictions to traffic on Pearl Street when that
Okay.
point of work is happening.
Okay.
So we think that that resource would also be used for that street as well.
Okay, great. Sorry, last question. Another one sort of out of curiosity, did you get more than one bid or just the one from SD Ireland?
We got 2 bids this year.
Okay.
There's only a handful of contractors in this area that are really qualified to bid on these projects.
Yeah.
There's probably 4 or 5 in total.
Mhm.
So we did receive 2 bids, one from Engineers Construction and the other one from SD Ireland.
Okay, cool, just curious. Okay, that's it. Who wants to go next?
Go next.
Okay.
Just in the theme of coordination. That's who I am. I know that, have you been in touch with Burlington School District about the construction at Integrated Arts Academy?
Not yet.
Yeah, I could say yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, Phil.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So we have a bi-weekly meeting with the Burlington School District, myself and Christina Cangelosi. We meet bi-weekly and we let them know kind of what we have on deck for projects for the summer. They are aware. We worked closely with them when they moved the school to St. Mark's over the last summer, and they will hopefully, fingers crossed, be moving back in the fall and acknowledging that when we paved Walnut Street
Right.
2 years ago, on the first day of school, thank you, that was me.
Yep.
I made that mistake.
Yep.
It'll never happen again. So, yeah, we recognize that paving Archibald before school starting up is important, key element.
Yeah.
And the school district is aware.
Okay, so I think, yeah, making sure they're aware of that.
Yes.
Getting all that done before, because there are also yellow school buses as well
Oh, sure.
as neighborhood specials that go through that corridor as
Yeah.
parents, and there are also just like a ton of little munchkins who walk to school. So when I heard you talk about working on those sidewalks, I mean, if I
Right.
ruled the world, I know, Chapin, hold on.
Right.
Just, I would prioritize just like the safety and infrastructure around every single school. So
Which
we
is,
can-
which is why we wanted to include traffic calming, a new crosswalk on St. Louis with a curb extension, and all the other traffic calming features along Archibald. That's exactly why we wanted to do that.
And with the authorization of this contract, that really opens the door and allows us to start doing that in-depth planning, that level of coordination. And we will have to be fairly dialed in this year too, not only on Archibald Street, but Pearl Street too, College Street. So there is some careful coordination that will need to be done this year.
Yeah, and we have the weather.
And weather,
Like
sure, you can't pave in the rain, that's very true.
Get all that.
I just want to point out, this is Caleb's second public meeting of the evening.
Of
So
the evening.
So losing my voice. I apologize.
You're worn out.
Doing double duty here.
Yeah, no, for me, that was, that's really the biggest thing, that coordination. And then I guess that kind of piece of, what part of our budget is the, holy moly, we had like another weather event and we need to fix kind of whatever road. So is there
Yeah,
space in the
so
budget for that?
the street capital, we have a contingency available in our budget that we hold for, emergency purposes and other things that pop up. So, if there's something that pops up, we have capacity within this contract to look to do a change order, to add scope of work, to address issues. So that's what the contingency in the contract's for, is for things like that, as well as potentially other funds within the street capital that might be able to be reallocated in the case of an emergency. So,
Have you done any tracking over the past few years about, where's Brendan Hogan for this data point? For, what sort of weather events have kind of increased, either an allocation or a need for resources to remedy some sort of infrastructure as a result, specifically of, you know, probably more common extreme weather events that we're facing? Like, are we, you know, are we seeing, wow, we need to really budget an extra X amount in order to have enough kind of rainy day funds for these events?
I would say when it comes to street infrastructure, that's usually not a major factor in accounting for the budget. It's
Okay.
more what's inflation in order to
Okay.
continue to do the amount of roads that we're trying to do, the distances that we're trying to cover each year. So we don't generally look at the weather aspect. I mean, you have freeze thaw, you know, you never know when you have a little freeze thaw apocalypses that happen, that we have a lot more patching, then we end up readjusting our budget to account for more patching to occur, more pothole filling than maybe a different year. But those are sort of things that we would look at, but it's more on a smaller scale
Okay.
than a larger budget
With,
review.
with Burlington being mostly paved, you know, we don't experience the same demolishment of roadways that we see in the more rural communities with
Okay.
dirt roads. The one example would be the Intervale Road, which flooded last year. You know, we can fix that pretty easily in-house, and we have a contractor who will grade it a couple times a year to keep it in good standing. But yeah, being paved, it's less of a concern in this municipality.
Is there ever thought of paving Intervale Road? Am I getting?
There's thought of it. It needs a ditch first.
Drainage is a problem.
Yeah,
Drainage is a problem.
Drainage is a problem.
The most promising update you would see would be with the Intervale side path.
That's right.
And that would obviously just kind of be on the paved section there as it goes down to the dirt portion. So to directly answer your question, no, not at
No.
this time.
And that's coming soon, though. I know, like, as far as the.
Just coming out of right-of-way
project,
phase.
right.
At this stage, we're not ready to pursue grants or funding for a larger project. They're wrapping up right-of-way at this point.
Okay. All right. Diversion. That's it.
Couple of years.
Thanks so much.
Commissioner Davis, how you feeling about going next?
Yeah, I can go
Okay.
next, thanks. In terms of the speed tables and the traffic calming, I'm curious about the, I guess maybe like the efficacy of using the street paving contract to do traffic calming as opposed to paving more street. So I'm wondering about kind of like the opportunity cost associated with.
So the
doing
funding for the traffic calming isn't coming out of street capital. The funding for the traffic calming is coming out of transportation. So, and our funding, transportation funding, is completely bond funded. We can't use funding towards paving. It's not funding that can be used towards paving at all.
Yeah, so part of this is the street paving contract, and in the memo, it goes in a little bit more detail. We get different funding sources for different scopes of work within the one contract to get better deals for the city on our work. So when you do the paving, if you're going to install a speed feature like a speed table, that you have to pave a certain limit to have something to key into for the infrastructure to last. And so by joining both of our intent is to pave as much as possible. Their intent is to work with traffic and to help mediate the traffic and speeds. And so by funding from both points, we're
It just makes sense for us to work together. You know, they have a contractor that's willing to do the work, and it's less expensive. I mean, really, if we did a traffic calming project and just put that off for bid, the prices are going to be astronomically higher. So they're already there doing the paving project. We're working well together as a paving team and the transportation team. But unfortunately, the transportation dollars, specifically towards what we do, planning and traffic calming and this and that, can't be used for paving anyways.
Okay, yeah, that fully answers my question, thanks,
Sure.
and I'm glad.
Yeah, those are great
I'm glad that the combination
Sure
is
question.
better, like, is multiplicatively.
We're just trying to work smarter.
Yeah, and that's awesome.
We try to be as savvy as possible to put out contracts that will get competitive bids.
Yeah, that's awesome. In terms of, so another question about the speed tables, does the speed table affect the maintenance costs of a street? Does the existence of those certain traffic calming methods?
I'd say yes. I mean, anytime you have additional infrastructure, it costs money to maintain. So to just repave a street that doesn't have speed tables on it is going to be cheaper than repaving a street that does have speed tables, as those tables are individually installed features that you'd pave, then you cut into it, and then you install them. So to reestablish them, it's going to have more material, more labor, so yes, more cost associated.
It depends on how it was installed though too. If it was just a one-off and someone just paved over the top of it and it wasn't keyed into the street, it would be a low-quality product, then, you know, you're gonna wind up with a low-quality street. So in the long run, it can be more expensive. But to Corey's original point, it can be more expensive, yeah.
Okay. I could see ways where maybe it would even be cheaper a little bit, like on the other side of like not having to do as much if it's a raised crosswalk, for instance, not having to like repaint the crosswalk as often and things like that as well, which I would think would be beneficial. I was kind of curious about like maybe like water collection at the like crease where it's like coming up and like things like that, and whether that has an appreciable like impact on the maintenance.
We always consider that in the design of our speed tables. What we do predominantly is leave a 1 foot shoulder between the curb line and that speed table to allow for drainage. And then we look at where it will collect on the approach and the downslope taper. Does it need a catch basin? Can we scoop that around at the side of it? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no too, but that's always considered and addressed.
And in this case, it's a yes. We did put in 2 new drainage structures to address drainage concerns, not necessarily next to the speed tables, but where the curb extensions are. There'll be a new catch basin structure on the southeast corner of Intervale, and then also for the new crosswalk at St. Louis, there'll be another infiltration chamber that, because stormwater team, we work with the stormwater team as well to make sure we're putting in stuff that works for them. They did not want just a drainage structure going straight into the stormwater system. They wanted something a little bit more robust, but yeah, we do consider those things, of course.
Yeah, awesome. I assume that this is all considered, so I don't mean to ask to like
keep asking those
imply
questions,
that-
brother. Keep asking
Like,
those
it's fine for us
questions.
to sit here and tell you we considered it. We did. It's a different story when you get out on the street too, and you're actually going to build this thing.
That's right.
So that's where our on-site involvement and really that ability to have field changes and put things where they need to go factor in. So a lot of times, sometimes there are slight tweaks to our plan set. It's all well intended and just moving stuff where it needs to go to actually function.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all very much, and I'm looking forward to a lot of this being done. So really good work, and excited to see it in the future.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Barr.
We have no more comments. You guys really covered a lot. One of the things that I was thinking about, so
Okay.
great plan.
Great. Any public comments on this item?
No.
Okay. Guess we'll close. This is item 6.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Thanks so
Excited
much.
for another season.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Move on to the director's report.
Great, thank you. I'm going to start off by having Rob share a little bit of what was referred to earlier about the capital planning portal. So, well, maybe I'll go through a couple of my items while Rob's bringing that up.
No pressure, Rob.
Yeah. So the big exciting news, thanks to you all for all your support. Having the public also give us resounding support on the 3 bond requests was huge. Your engagement, your unanimous support, the council's unanimous support, the good community outreach was really so heartwarming. There was no political action committee involved. This was just on the ground education and explaining the need, and we were so pleased with that vote. So it was important, I think, to hear the paving timing and scheduling. You'll see enhanced paving starting 2026. I've been working with Water Resources to advance the design work on the wastewater plant upgrades, and we'll be back in front of you all soon to explain the timeline there as well. But just huge thanks. This was a remarkable accomplishment for all of us. Main Street Business Owner Meeting, as you saw in my written director's report, March 28th in City Hall. There will be a meeting with businesses to discuss one-on-one with them, again, you know, how the project's going, what the concerns are, and how we can best respond. So that is ongoing, and we are continuing to look at Route 127 improvements. There was a fatality in January, and we've been requesting the crash report from the police department and looking at lighting and design features to see if anything is needed to be changed as a result. Rob, why don't you hit the capital planning map?
Thanks, Chapin. I think most of you on the commission are aware of the construction portal that we've had now live on our website for close to a decade. Just a heads up, we ported over a new website back in October, November, so we were a little less focused on construction. So we're still working on some of our construction-oriented sites. We spent a lot of time on the town meeting day information prior to that, but similarly as you could before, you go right to the DPW homepage. All the website URLs are a little clunkier, but we do have redirects, so if you remember it as burlingtonvt.gov/DPW, you'll still get to the same page you're used to. The construction portal is easily found either on this rotating set of slides or right on this top left stationary toolbar. For ease of finding, the construction portal is going to continue to, the construction portal page is going to continue to host the construction portal, but it's going to be more of a one-stop shop. We've kind of had things in other places, but we have a few really awesome resources for the public this coming year, and so we want to make sure they're all collated in the right place. So I mentioned things transferred over, kind of less aesthetically pleasing. So this will be updated a little bit more, but you will still have access to your upcoming construction year projects as always. With the sidewalk contract coming to the council in a few weeks, we wanted to aim for May 1st rather than any earlier, with a lot of other things kind of still to come. We normally hit May 1st, and that's when we get our biggest bump. So like always, you can come to the construction portal and you have a few different options to see everything we've worked on since the passage of the original bonds when the construction portal went live. And when the construction portal went live back in 2017, and then you'll also have the ability when it's live to see the 2025 map and or everything that's actively under construction. Most people intuitively don't quite grasp that difference. The difference between for instance, 2025 and active would simply be you see everything that's coming, happened, or under construction in 2025, and then the active projects, if you're like driving around, you're like, what was that? You'll have more of an ability to see what's actively being worked on right now. So this is generally what you've been used to with some formatting tweaks. But what we're really pleased to show you, and I think Corey mentioned it during his update, we've got our downtown detour map, which is the coordination map for Main Street, but also the confluence of Main Street and the Parkway, and then anything else that occurs downtown. Like last year, we were trying to build in when we thought Pearl Street was going to happen, I think, or no, when Pearl Street was happening in the other segment. This year, when Pearl Street happens in the new segment, anything else that's occurring downtown will be hosted on this downtown detour map. Actively updated every week, if not throughout the week. We have a really active team working on this right now. It can be a little confusing at first, but I think if you spend any time with it, you'll get a sense of how you might be redirected. It's, I think, a great resource for those working downtown, traveling downtown regularly, to be able to look at this, get a sense of what's happening on any given week. Finally, the big one that we did want to show you was what our capital planning team put together with great integration and effort by teams across the board, and especially our tech services team, which is a sense of all the capital needs that are generally on the short and medium term horizon for the city. You can get a sense of everything that's being presented here, and this is a lot of the information that was kind of the backbone of the general obligation $20 million bond. For tonight's, I think, relevance, this top toolbar here will bring you to the street sidewalk street paving and sidewalk tab, which is, I think Corey mentioned earlier, will give you a holistic sense of the network. What kind of street you may happen to live on, Cumberland Road, a tertiary residential street, for instance, versus Pine Street and Arterial. It will also, by color, let's see if we have this. This is the sidewalk map. No, sorry, this is the paving map. So you'll get a sense color-coded what meets or does not meet acceptable PCI score. I think we've said, we've found that 10 miles of our streets, which are color-coded in red here, don't meet that score. You can click on your street and get a better kind of ground level view of what categories your street fits in terms of what kind of street it is. And I believe we may have listed the PCI score or a range by street. If I promise you this works, but GIS can sometimes be a little funky. More to come on this because I don't want to take up too much time here, but generally when this is working well and loading quickly, maybe if you're hardwired, because it was working earlier today, you will get a closer view of the street that you're interested in.
Could it be that like 4 of us here are on this?
That shouldn't really matter that much,
Okay.
but just pointing that it's not coming up now. So I'd encourage you, I think since you're all pretty interested in nuts and bolts and data, this is a great page, again, put together by a team of folks around the city. Capital program really put a lot of heart into getting this information together. There's much more than just the paving and the sidewalk data. But more to come on this since it's not showing up for us. There we go. So you can see if the street's accepted. You can see what the street name, the PCI score, and the PCI category, among many other nifty GIS fields. So it's a good tool for the public. It is a tool that could mislead the public in terms of how quickly they may expect their street to be paved for all the reasons Caleb and Corey pointed out earlier: utility coordination, traffic calming, other projects nearby. So that will be incumbent on myself and others to make sure we communicate, think appropriately on how this map is used and how it serves our work, but doesn't necessarily indicate a definite order of how the work's going to get done.
Thank you, Rob. Happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone want to go first?
I'll go.
Yeah, on the director's
Sounds
report or and this?
So Rob, could you pull up the
Yeah, of course.
the page you were just on? So on this page, I don't see anything that actually defines what PCI is. I know that it says down at the bottom, streets, paving, condition inventory, but it may
Yeah.
not be clear to people.
Great point.
Oh, here we go. Yep.
There's so much information on this page that you will quickly, as a member of the public who maybe doesn't look at this a lot, get lost. So there's, one thing we've talked about is how this page gets embedded in the actual city page, where maybe it can be a little clearer what you're about to look at. But that's going to be a design question, but that's a great point.
Yeah. Dang, there was something else, and now is the no PCI, is that the Intervale Road that's not paved in that pie chart? The 0.12%?
That is a good question. I wonder if you know offhand, Corey?
I'm pretty sure that's included in it, and then I think there's one other stretch that is just such that it doesn't have a PCI. I can't remember what exactly it is off the top of my head, but
Okay.
yeah, pretty much Intervale is big portion of that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What was I going to say? I think that's it for now. I forget if I had something else.
Great.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to go?
Just, this is a question about the communication. I love the emails from Natalie that I get every Friday. Natalie, I don't even know her name. Natalie Boyle.
Yeah.
Because it has that map of where you can go, where you cannot go, where you can park, all that information. Is that something that's also shared on Front Porch Forum?
We don't put that on Front Porch Forum simply because we wouldn't have enough posts to consistently get the Main
Okay.
Street emails regularly updated. We have had, at this point, I think it's twice a year, coordination updates that go on Front Porch Forum between the Parkway, Main Street, but otherwise we would quickly lose our ability to post other things.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thank Natalie, because I read Fridays.
She does a great job.
Yeah.
As does, if you're not on the Parkway list, our team there does as excellent of a job on their weekly emails.
That's good. Are you going to talk more about another issue in the director's report, or should I just lay into it now?
You go for it.
Municipal recycling?
Yes.
Can you expand on what's going to happen? And
We
then-
are evaluating our recycling program as part of our FY26 budget and as part of the Mayor's Modern Gov initiative. When we started recycling, we were a leader 30 years ago, and that many haulers didn't provide residential collection services. So that was important that the city get out and help what was a cultural change that has largely been adopted around the country. We are evaluating as part of FY26 what the advantages and disadvantages are of keeping recycling or winding it down. We are talking to the City Council on Monday through the Modern Gov initiative that the mayor is presenting on raising the question of whether to continue recycling. And I think I had said in my director's report that we'd be back next month on the follow-up from the council meeting to have a more thorough conversation.
I'm just going to say, for the record, you know how I feel about a gazillion heavy-duty trucks. 6 different heavy-duty trucks, from Gaithier's to the Red People to Casella to, our city trucks to Duffy's. I live on Overlake Park. Like, it's not a big street.
Right.
It's a huge impact on our public infrastructure.
It is a good point. It's one of the considerations. And if we are going to get out of recycling, then one of the conversations at the council and the commission is, what do we do with that? Do we move towards a consolidated collection system where we regulate the collection in the city such that we can designate who is authorized to collect trash and recycling in neighborhoods and get a more efficient system?
Can't wait for next month. Thanks.
Thank you for your interest in these public works topics.
No, I actually have no comments. I think it was thorough.
Okay, I have hopefully a quick question. So part of the Beltline is being repaved, right?
Yeah.
And the section that's being repaved does not include where the fatal crash happened, is that correct?
Correct.
So there's not an ability to use that paving contract to put in traffic calming in that area, right? Just,
Yes, the area of
Crash is
deteriorated
north.
pavement is further to the south.
right, okay. Okay, just wanted
Yeah.
to confirm that. That's the only question I have.
I realize I remember what I was originally going to say. The construction website, the opening, I think it was in red, where it says like will be updated with this year's construction projects by May 1st.
Yep.
As someone who did not grow up in New England, it's not clear to me, or it is clear to me now, but it might not have been clear to me why May 1st would be the date. So I could see someone visiting that site and being frustrated that we're 4 months into the year and it's not updated by May 1st.
Mhm.
So I think it could benefit from saying like,
Right.
our construction projects don't start until May 1st. which is why it'll be updated by May 1st or something like to that effect.
Oh, that's great feedback. Yeah, there's that, and then because of that seasonal timing, there's also when all the contracts generally get approved by city council, the main contracts for paving, sidewalk especially, so absolutely, we can flesh that out.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
Okay. I think we will close this item and move on to commissioner items. Does anyone have any items they would like to bring forward?
I have some items.
Go for it, go for it.
So first, the communication around the Pine Street cutoff, the southern part of Pine Street connecting to Queen City Parkway, I think was awesome. I think I felt shockingly aware of the actual like date that it was going to happen. So I knew I think that day or the next day I was like, oh, I'm going to Hungerford, and usually I would take kind of a back route to go there.
Right.
But I knew that I couldn't, so I was like, okay, I'm planning a different route. So I really appreciate that as someone who used that area quite a bit, but I also, I think the signage, and now like the cones and everything, but I think the signage leading up to it was really beneficial to everyone in the area that might have used it for whatever purposes. So thank you very much for that. As a final maybe update to the Champlain Parkway Lakeside Avenue intersection right turn arrow, I did confirm, and I even have a picture, that there is a right turn green arrow on the actual like overhead, whatever you call it, the signal thingy, which does like completely solve the thing that I brought up like a few minutes ago. So it does exist. It's great. It works. I finally was like in such a situation where I was stopped at the red light to turn left while it was all like being green, and I got to see it in action. So it was not me hallucinating. It is good to go. So that's awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Then also with the Champlain Parkway, I had a very bizarre experience that hopefully is not commonplace, but someone, whatever the street is, if you're going south on the Champlain Parkway, that's to the right of it, like across the, not really a median, but
Tater, right? Is that the right name?
I have no clue. I've never been on that street.
There's
so.
Briggs Street that parallels City Market, out in front, parallels the Parkway out in front of City Market.
I think so.
And
It's where
goes
like I think petroglyphs and stuff would be like
The street to know.
always passing that. Someone was driving on that street, also going south on a motorcycle, and then went in the like drainage cutoff area, like where the curb is like lowered, and got out in front of me without actually looking that I was coming. Which was very bizarre, and I don't necessarily know that we need to address or that anyone needs to address a like one-off really bizarre situation, but
That's crazy.
I don't know.
I can see it happening,
Yeah.
now that you say that.
That was the specially designed motorcycle on-ramp.
Yeah, it was super weird. And then that same person eventually like wound up going up Home Avenue, turning left on Pine Street, and just going back in the other direction that they could have done in the first place, it seemed.
Right.
So I don't know, very weird.
Yeah. Well, it's helpful to hear that. We'll monitor the situation. Clearly, we don't want people making those moves, and if we find that there needs to be some sort of intervention, we will figure out how to make that happen.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
I
Planting
hope.
an elephant grass.
Yeah.
Like no
I
outlet.
I hope that doesn't
Yeah, turn around out.
happen
Yeah.
for anyone else, but it was, really, really weird. And it wasn't even the last one, like, going south. It was just like, they were just like, all right, let's go.
Okay.
So they probably felt cool doing it, so, at least.
They probably did it again.
There's that. Yeah, they were just circling. But I wanted to bring that up.
Thank you.
And then my last item is I just appreciate the thought and effort that went into the Home Avenue, Shelburne Road intersection, and whatever that other street is that I never go on. The no right on red kind of policy with the traffic and the analysis that was done. I know that was in the consent agenda, but I take that like most days. I wind up at that intersection, so I think it will be beneficial It'll solve kind of the signage issue with the laundromat blocking people's view and then like potentially going right. And then I've seen multiple instances where pedestrians have been kind of in a possible bad situation. So I'm really, really excited about that, really happy with it. Excited to see how it functions, but I think it'll be good. So
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you very much for that. I guess related to it, I have noticed, which of course this would be the case, but the more that we've had the no turn on red policy, the more I've noticed people that are violating the policy. And it does, I do just wonder about like, I guess I really am out of my depth in terms of like how to improve people's compliance with that. But I wonder if like a posted fine amount or like I've seen that in other cities. But anyway, just curious about that. Main reason I bring it up is just because if the goal is to protect pedestrians, then someone behaving in such an unpredictable way is actually making it worse in like just a kind of a flashpoint situation, where then pedestrians may kind of have the hopefully not false sense of security, but kind of like a moment that happens in that way. So I'm just curious if there's any procedure for that or like thought about it.
It is a challenge. I've noticed the same thing, and we can talk internally about whether there's interventions to promote better behavior at those locations.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is hard, is you can only design features to a certain extent. At some point, there is enforcement that has to come into play also, because again, you know, people are going to do what they want sometimes, regardless of how well something might be designed or how well intended it is, and how much of a benefit and safety measure it could be. So, we will observe, and again, we're always looking at what we potentially could do differently.
And is I think we discussed this like months ago, but the cameras that are up on like this intersection, for instance, are they tracking compliance with the right turn? No. Okay.
No, those are only like stop bar locations, queue length type camera operations. So they will count cars, but they don't count, car did make a movement when the light was red. They don't do that feature.
Is it possible for them to do that?
I am not sure of the capabilities based upon the level of technology there. There probably is capacity or capability within the softwares to do that, but that's not something that the city currently is utilizing from those vendors.
Okay. State law doesn't allow video traffic enforcement at this time. It is something that we want to discuss with you and the Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee, because there is, like on on Route 127, where we talked about a speeding condition, and given the police staffing, that frankly the best way if we want to do enforcement in a community is to look at automated traffic enforcement. So that's a conversation to have with you all and in front of the legislature at a future session.
That's great, and I've lived in places that have had photo enforcement that's been, it seemed effective to me, anecdotally. I, of course, don't have access to the data, but I am wondering if to kind of start that process, it might be beneficial to be tracking compliance with those cameras if they have the capability, because then we have some data to present. And I'm very much in favor of both the enforcement, but then even like the previous step of just being able to track the number of compliant, or the kind of percentage of compliance, to just give a sense of, because it may be incredibly unimportant and it's the availability heuristic, and I'm just remembering all the times that someone actually does, go through the red when it's like 1% of the time or something. But
we can check.
Okay, yeah, that would be awesome. So yeah, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Anyone want to go next?
I go next. So glad about the water phones, that we didn't have to go to my vote yes on water and no on cholera. Although everyone I spoke to was like, okay, we get the cholera thing, Peggy. A question, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this, Corey, earlier about the paving thing. Summit Ridge has had some drainage issues, like forever. And so it's a little bit chunked up, and I don't know if any of, will that bit be fixed before, or remediated, or whatever, before, and that usually happens like in the freeze-thaw bit. And I don't know what dig-up was going on a couple weeks ago, but just making sure that there's some sort of integrated work before the paving on Cliff Street intersects, because it's so close to the corner.
Yeah, that was identified as like a ground seepage issue prior to this most recent, what appeared to be maybe some sort of leak that was investigated. The paving limits would capture resurfacing back into Summit Ridge. Likely we would extend the limits. Again, what Caleb had mentioned was that in the field, sometimes you make some changes, and that's one of those spots that we were aware of some issue that might need to be investigated. It sounds like it was investigated previously, earlier this winter. And so, the paving limits would likely extend to fix the surface in that area.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a water main break a couple weeks ago there.
That was it, okay. Saw the trucks.
Yeah.
I walked there, like, and I was like, oh, this is a mess.
Yeah,
Sorry.
on a weekend, in the middle of
Always,
cold weather.
right.
Happens.
Well, kudos to the crews for, always taking care of that and responding that, so appreciate that. Last thing, Director Spencer, I haven't paid attention, I should say, when I've been on South Union in front of Edmonds Middle School. But I'm wondering if there's gonna be a signal there soon that says no turn on red during the pedestrian crossing.
Yes, the commission did wonderfully approve no right turn on red on Union. I will check with staff to understand its installation time for that sign.
Okay.
I know with the Main Street construction, we will be impacting that intersection very soon.
Okay.
So I can certainly get you an update.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, that's all, thanks. Commissioner Barr, anything?
The only thing I have is an observation that I made. I don't know if there was a sweeper, what do you call them, street sweeper?
Yeah.
That broke or something, but it looked like there was an inordinate amount of dirt in the bike lane along Colchester Avenue and Nash Place there. It's almost like it wasn't sucking it up. It might have been sweeping it, but not sucking it. It just made like a little berm.
Right. Usually for the winter, we need multiple passes.
Okay.
So what's happening is we're getting maybe 50% of the material, and the rest of the material is basically the broom is pushing it right
There's a lot
past
of
the
material,
broom.
so.
Yeah.
A
So-
couple people in the neighborhood have mentioned it.
But it's helpful to get your feedback. If you notice that and there's a safety issue, we need to come back, just see Click Fix it.
Okay.
We will get out with the sweeper and get it done.
It was fine for cars, I think, but
Right.
for cyclists,
Yeah.
probably not so much.
A windrow in the bike lane. Yeah.
And I thought maybe you were making protected bike lanes with berms. Yeah, good idea.
Good one.
That's it.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes me think, I didn't have anything, but now I do. When is Operation Clean Sweep?
We do not have our dates finally scheduled yet, but we are meeting pretty shortly to discuss both the dates, the rollout, and then the potential for an expansion of Clean Sweep.
Great. It's usually like late April, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're
Yeah,
ahead.
early May.
I keep forgetting that like winter it's not really even
Wait
over
until
yet.
Friday, I know, see, we're just.
Yeah.
It's like 65 degrees today, and I'm like, oh, it's time to
It'll be
time
40
for street
tomorrow.
sweep.
and it'll be- Yeah.
Right.
They do tend right around this time of year as they work on the roads. They also tend to get out sweeping on a case-by-case, street-by-street basis. But Clean Sweep is the one kind of comprehensive time of year. So I'm sure they've been out, but I don't know that for a fact, but I know they're gonna be out more aggressively. We do have snow in the forecast, so who knows how that's gonna impact that.
Do you mind if I bring up one more thing?
Go for it.
Thanks. Sorry, everybody, but I noticed out here on Lakeside, sometimes people will come this direction and want to turn left into Cumbies, and there really is not that much space on the road for them to be doing that, and it creates a bit of a mucking up the intersection. I wasn't sure if there was probably you all have noticed it far more than I have, working right here. So I was curious if there was thought into a way to prevent that, or if maybe companies didn't want any other change and that's why nothing was done, or like, just curious about that in general.
Hold on. Hold on. There we go.
I can't exactly speak to the design of that. The Cumbies parking lot and the curb cuts had been done as such prior to facilitate their ability for their tankers to get in, get out, and their trash pickup, and just the movement in their lot. As part of the parkway design, that was maintained. And yeah, while there is a lot of that traffic turning in there, there isn't really without substantial changes, there isn't really a way of restricting that movement. It's obviously easier for traffic to come in off of Pine Street rather than trying to wait for the queues to clear to then get through there. It's something we're gonna have to look at a little bit, because when the full parkway does open, if that is something that then we're finding is backing up traffic, then a modification may need to be made at that time. But currently, it's noted, it's been observed and documented in our to be observed over time category. There's a number of things within this design that are falling in that category. And as a city, it's our responsibility to make changes where changes are needed. So, yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, but yeah, we'll continue to observe it.
Would it possibly make sense just to paint one of those like "Don't be here" sections on the lane on that side that just opens the Cumbies spot?
You have to look at the queue distances and the equipment that's there for how far back they can manage that, because if you do a don't block the box situation there, you would then have to extend the lane for the queuing to be able to allow the queues to occur properly. Otherwise, you're going to end up with just one long line down Lakeside because of the way in which the lane's currently split and the distances that you have for that left-hand turn queue versus the right turn. So it kind of has a domino effect if we were to look at that, but it can still be looked at to see what those impacts would be.
We'll monitor.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. Glad it's being looked at.
Okay. We'll close commissioner items and move on to adjournment and our next
Motion to
meeting date.
adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Our next meeting date is April 16th, 2025.
Yay.
Mm-hmm.